As a furry and somebody currently studying film production, I thought it'd be interesting to take a look at what I felt were the 5 most influential films in the furry fandom. We hear a lot about Robin Hood, but there are so many other films that play a crucial role in the development of present-day furries. Now, before this list begins, I should note that I am not at all counting Zootopia. Being a fairly recent film, I don't see too many people who had discovered their interest in the furry fandom after the movie's release. While one day it will be, I can guarantee it, I'm looking at the films that most defy what I call the first 2 generations. You see, I personally break them down into 2 groups, Generation 1 and Generation 2. Now, before we begin, I just want to point out that this is my personal opinion on the furry fandom in terms of generations. Now, the 2 generations I mean are Generation 1. I consider these the furries who were sci-fi attendees who eventually started coming to convention after convention in sci-fi, more so for the anthropomorphic creatures in sci-fi culture. These furries came together and started some of the first furry conventions. The second generation I tend to look at in a much broader sense. You see, this generation also had a love of cartoon animals, but they didn't find the fandom until they stumbled upon it, say perhaps the internet, or word from a friend, or in my case, radio. And this generation helped grow the fandom into larger numbers, starting up more conventions, as well as opening it up to more media exposure. This generation ranges in ages and made up of people who joined the fandom between the early 2000s to today. So with that straightened out, on to our list. Starting off our list is the lovable buddy film about the unlikely friendship between Todd, a red fox, and Copper, a bloodhound. As time goes on, we see these two take on more instinctive roles, while their friendship continues to be plagued with the social standards on how these two should perceive each other. In time, Copper becomes a skilled hunting dog, and Todd now lives on a game preserve. Despite now becoming enemies and the attempts Copper has made to kill Todd, once Copper's life was endangered, we see Todd willing to save his former friend's life when a bear attempts to kill him and his owner Slade. Meaning that despite all the hatred and social protocols that pin these two as enemies, Todd still cherished the friendship he once had with Copper so much that he was willing to sacrifice his own life just to save Copper's. In the end, we see Copper willing to take a bullet to save Todd from his owner. When Slade gives up and walks away, we see indication that the two have rekindled their friendship for one another. Seeing a movie like this, where the social roles affect the treatment of others, makes it all the more interesting of a film to watch when you read up on all the production struggles that came with making this film. So now to the topic at hand, where does it stand in the furry fandom? Well, The Fox and the Hound demonstrates friendship, and is one of the best films to do so. When you look at the furry fandom, one of its key characteristics is its friendly nature. Not just to other furries, but to the general public as well. Furries in suit are always open to hugs, taking pictures, and interacting with others. The suit themselves allow the wearer to break out a more friendly and playful personality, one that's harder to demonstrate otherwise. Furries typically support one another, and no matter what type of furry you are, there's usually a place for you to fit in. The support and care furries have gone as far as supporting local businesses when they were dealt with financial hardships. So when viewing The Fox and the Hound, you're watching a buddy film with talking animals. A lot of furries who watch this movie at an early age will grow to appreciate good quality friendship and fall in love with what the fandom celebrates, talking cartoon animals at the same time, enjoying its characters and one of its most important, if not most important, characteristic.
Best friend, and you're mine too, Todd. And we'll always be friends forever, won't we? Yeah, forever.
The only non-Disney film on this list, All Dogs Go to Heaven, is one of the most notable works of Don Bluth. At the time of its release, Sullivan Bluth Studios had several box office successes with the likes of The Secret and Nymph, An American Tail, and The Land Before Time. Don Bluth and Gary Oldman's animations were truly the first to rival Disney in both the feature film and home video markets. Now, despite the success of their previous films, All Dogs Go to Heaven was not as big a commercial success as its preceders. However, it dominated the video rental market and is up there with the likes of The Lion King and Jerry Maguire as one of the biggest selling films on the VHS format. The movie tells of Charlie B. Barklin, who, after being killed by his former business partner, Carface, returns to Earth in an attempt to return to the life he lived. Upon returning, he discovers an orphan named Anne-Marie, who Carface is using to win at rat races. Charlie breaks her out, and the two of them, along with Charlie's best friend, Itchy Itchiford, win big at everything from horse races to kangaroo fights. There's actually a lot of illegal gambling in this film. Charlie is once again living the life he had lived before, but after Carface tries to yet again kill him, Charlie ends up sacrificing his life to save Anne-Marie's. By giving up his life to get Anne out of harm's way, he was granted an opportunity back to heaven after finally performing an act of kindness, proving that truly all dogs go to heaven. The movie has heart. It can be very dark at times, yes. What if it's display of murder, gambling, assault, arson? Yet it has a very deep symbolic meaning behind all of it. With All Dogs Go to Heaven, we're left with a message that people can change and that they can redeem themselves by doing good unto others. People can watch this beloved classic and be inspired to be better people and to do more with their lives with the time that they have on Earth. I believe many who saw this film that are now a part of the furry fandom felt the same and held the message and its characters to heart for the heart that it displayed. And you can see it in many different artists, from design to story, that the message and its characters still have an effect on its fans to this day. I don't see how anyone could disagree that this movie should be on this list. Here we have a perfect example of a movie that depicts someone getting the opportunity to become an anthropomorphic animal. By upsetting the Great Spirits, Kenai, our protagonist, is transformed into the very thing he had just killed, a bear, and must learn to see through another's eyes, learn how precious life is for other creatures, and to truly understand the meaning of brotherhood. If this fun-sounding adventure didn't intrigue young furries enough, we should know that the film is also set in a very spiritual environment, where man and spirit are close. This allows us to see a world that is more magical and inspiring. It leaves you with a sense that there is much more beauty in this world than what appears, and that man and animal are essentially one. Not only that, but by the end of the film, Kenai decides to remain a bear in order to look after Coda, his new younger brother. So now we have a human who is transformed into a bear, goes on this magical journey of spiritual growth, and becomes a better person because of it. And in the end, decides to remain a bear. Now to a young child who is watching this for the first time, who was fascinated at the concept of him becoming a bear, and like many first-time viewers, was more than likely surprised that he decided to stay a bear, this, along with the aforementioned settings, and let's not forget its joyful upbeat music, played the catalyst to introducing young audiences to the idea of experiencing life as a furry character. We should note that Kenai became a more caring and compassionate person after he became a bear. So one can assume, from a psychological standpoint, that a child could have come to the idea that they could only be their best unless under a furry persona, or fursona in this case. Now, I would love to dive more into the psychology of being a furry, but I shouldn't go off topic. However, there was a well-researched psychological study and presentation by Dr. Courtney Plant, aka Nuka, who has presented his findings at various conventions such as Furry Fiesta, BLFC, and OklaCon over the past several years that I highly recommend, and I will link it in the description down below. So to recap, Brother Bear is a strongly influential film in the furry fandom, for it offers us an actual display of the fantasy of furry, a man becoming an anthropomorphic animal, on the big screen no less. Sure, it wasn't the first film to do this, but it was the first to do so with an actual furry creature, a creature bearing fur, one that we'd actually see in the furry fandom. Combine all this with an excellent plot, inspirational music, and beautiful animation, and you have a prime example of a celebrated film in the furry fandom. However, despite all these praises, I would like to state that everything we saw in the film would not have happened if the Nahi had just remade his basket.
We'll just make another basket.
We? Oh no. No, it took me 2 weeks to make that basket. You get Loverboy to do it. He's the one that's messing things up all the time. Typical Kenai.
All right, I'll go get your basket.
Let's face it, you knew this movie was going to be on this list. Everybody in the fandom knows how beloved Robin Hood is. In fact, whether you're new to the fandom, or you're just doing research, or you're looking at the research from the media exploring the fandom, Robin Hood typically comes up, usually playing the poster child as to what the fandom celebrates. The recognition of the film has, in recent years, become more of a punchline in the fandom, and at times is enjoyed by some, dare I say, sarcastically. Robin Hood, if you haven't already figured it out, is based on the heroic outlaw of medieval English folklore, given a more Disney approach. Here, everybody commonly depicted in the merry adventures of Robin Hood are now anthropomorphic animals. We find the brave, heroic, tight-wearing crusader, now depicted as a fox, the fair maiden a vixen, our hero's second-in-command a bear, and our hero's group of supporters as everything from a rooster to a badger. The film holds a quirk that links it to the fandom. It offers us a classic tale of humans now donning fur, tails, and muzzles, yes, but there's much more to it than that. You see, when the movie was first made, Disney produced it with two targeted audiences in mind. The first one being adults who grew up with the stories of Robin Hood, as told to them by their parents, and young children who hadn't read the tales of Robin Hood at all. Disney decided that presenting them as anthropomorphic animals would intrigue children to watch it and offer a unique take on the classic stories. Now, many who watched the film, even today, more than likely haven't read the stories, but to this day, many, furry or otherwise, have seen the film. And if they have read any of the tales of Robin Hood, it was likely the ones Disney produced. Now, I'm not saying that the human depiction is any less known. In fact, it is still the best known version, but this is why it's important to the furry fandom. You see, when a child watches this film, who fits the description of the youth demographic mentioned earlier, they're connecting these characters to the real ones. And usually, from a psychological standpoint, this can create a chain reaction that leaves them connecting talking animals to other human characters. This is because a talking animal is made to be seen as cute, warm, friendly, and with unique features that humans don't have, such as big eyes, pointy ears, and soft, snuggly fur. It allows a child to have an easier time remembering a character and his part in the story. So it introduced many to approaching characters as animals because it was easier to remember and made you enjoy the character more in their role in the story. Now for others, I feel at times that it had played a role socially. Think about it. Did you ever imagine somebody as someone else, say a character from a TV show, because it was easier to interact with them? Robin Hood opened many to the concept that anthropomorphics are a fun, friendly, and unique way to approaching storytelling, remembering a character, and even interacting with others. Today, there are modern films like Zootopia, which, according to director Brian Howard, was heavily inspired by Robin Hood for its use of anthropomorphics, so it seems that Robin Hood, in some way, will continue to inspire the interest and imagination of the furry fandom for many years to come. Without a shadow of a doubt, the most influential movie on this list goes to The Lion King. The fifth film released during the Disney Renaissance in 1994, The Lion King is a great example of the powerful and magical experience that Disney is known for providing through its stories, by offering unique and alternative views on well-known tales. This amusing and complex approach to writing is typically shown to be the most effective in providing the cinematic masterpieces that are both critically and commercially approved. The story of a young prince destined for the throne who must overthrow his uncle that killed his brother to fulfill his destiny is strongly inspired by the Shakespeare classic Hamlet. Now, beyond the story and plot, what really makes this film so influential for furries? Well, the way I see it, there are three key elements that give it this merit. For one, its location. From what I've gathered, I find a large percentage of the fandom lives and resides in North America. When someone is first exposed to this movie, fitting the aforementioned description, they're exposed to a new world. One that is full of bright colors, joyful music, and exotic animals. Basically, they were offered a fantasy world that was seen as more fun and interesting than the real world. A world that was full of troubles, and didn't have the talking animals that they loved in the film. One could say that the movie offered an escape, and was more than just a movie for some, but was inspiration, and it left its viewers with a sense of belonging. It sounds cheesy, I know, but look at the fandoms of Star Trek, Star Wars, and the Marvel and DC universes. They intrigue their followers by offering them an escape, a fantasy world unlike anything else. Number two is its expansion as a franchise. Unlike the other films on this list, The Lion King was not just a box office success, but a box office smash, grossing $968 million against its $42 million budget. That left Disney with a return of investment of about 23,047%, with the average successful box office film making just about 120%. That's only based around analytics research from Netflix and several independent research teams who have polled box office numbers of successful or slightly profitable films over the last 27 years. But with these numbers in mind, Disney now had an extremely profitable and successful product in their hands, and they were ready to market it across all manners of merchandise. Not only was there a sequel, a prequel parallel, 2 television series, a Broadway play, a soon-to-be live-action remake, and the VHS release, which dominated the video rental market, becoming the most successful VHS release of all time, But the movie expanded to video games, plushies, school supplies, clothes, costumes, books, comics, toy sets, Christmas ornaments, pillowcases, clocks, snow globes, jewelry, towels, handbags, and much, much more. I can honestly say that the expansion of the film's merchandise helped to increase interest in the film itself. I didn't find an interest in Disney films until my early teens, having grown up in the golden age of television cartoons, aka the cartoon era. But when I did, The Lion King was the first film I got into. I chose to watch it first because I had already had so much exposure to the film. I used to listen to the soundtrack on CD. My first Game Boy game was The Lion King, and one of my favorite shirts growing up was a Simba shirt. So with the expansion of the film to the general public, you can see how it was able to expand across a much broader audience years after the movie's release, having a strong hold on the fandom that still shows to this day. The third reason I give to its emotional attachment. When somebody watches The Lion King, they see life, tragedy, romance, friendship, courage, acceptance, obedience, and the emotional, spiritual growth of our protagonist Simba. We watch Simba grow right in front of our eyes, and we witness the circle of life at work. At the end of the film, you see that the circle of life has made a full rotation when the movie ends as it began. When many young viewers are watching this for the first time, they're seeing all these emotional experiences, likely for the first time in their lives. They create an emotional attachment to not only the movie itself, but to the characters as well. And you take this emotional attachment, combine it yet again with the aforementioned locations, which offer a magical and exotic fantasy world, which is full of anthropomorphic animals and, of course, no humans, and keep their interest going with all the available merchandise, and you have the early development of a furry. Today, the Lion King fandom is practically inseparable from the furry fandom, with any die-hard Lion King fan typically being a furry. So with that, you have what is, at least in my opinion, the most impactful, inspirational, and of course, the most influential movie in the furry fandom. Thanks for watching. This was episode 1 of Just for Fun, a brand new furry-themed YouTube series. Please, feel free to subscribe. There's going to be more original content coming from Wonderful Productions very soon.